Okay, so now we all know that there are no classes tomorrow, so I'm just going to send you these materials so that you can check this at home and then do your assignment and the paper. Well, first thing is we're going to check how we can interpret the descriptive statistics, and first of all I'll show you this example. That's the one that we saw in class, and of course this is from a teacher evaluation, and we have different kinds of aspects that were assessed. First of all, we have lesson quality, and then we have teacher's characteristics, and then we have different aspects of those general elements that were assessed. For example, for lesson quality we have content and materials, we have sequence and pace, and so on and so forth. So now once we have these results, which is this is a summary from a real assessment that we carried out about a long time ago, we can see then what are the aspects that were assessed are the ones that teachers are stronger at, and then which are the aspects in which the teachers need like more help. So first of all, we can see, as far as lesson quality is concerned, that the highest average was 4.12 for practice opportunities. So this means that according to the teachers' opinions, to the students' opinions, the teachers give a lot of opportunities for them to practice. Another high score in that part is of course the use of the target language, because we have a mean of 4.39, which is really high, and it's showing that the students are really satisfied with the target language use from the part of the teacher. When we look at these two examples, we can also see that for practice opportunities the mode was 5, and so it is for target language use. So this means that a lot of students circle number 5. That means that the number that was repeated more times for those items was 5, which means that the students were really satisfied with the target language use and the use of examples. If we look at the median, we have something similar. Like, if you remember, this is the value that we have right in the middle when we order all of the scores from the highest to the lowest. And in fact, for target language use, the median was 5. So that means that half of the group thought that the teacher's performance in this aspect was outstanding. Concerning the use of examples, the median is 4, which is also very high. Now, for the teacher's characteristics, we can also see that the students are very satisfied with, in general, with all of the characteristics of the teachers. This means that the results of this survey show that the students are really satisfied with the teacher's performance. And we can see in this case, for these aspects, that the ones that the teachers were most highly rated were the knowledge of the subject, right, with 4.47 in the mean, and their attendance. Apparently the teachers are very punctual. They have a mean of 4.46. So this means that the students are really satisfied with their teachers. And we can see pretty much the same thing that we saw in the first aspect, that the modes are mostly 5 and the medians are mostly 4. So this really means that the teacher have, according to the students, a very good performance on these aspects that were assessed. Now, we can see now, in general, in what aspects the opinions are similar, because if you remember, the mean, the mode, and the median are measures of central tendency. But now let's look at the differences. Let's see how the students have different opinions. If you see, something important to point out is the maximums and the minimums were of 5 and 1 in all cases. So this means that the range in all cases was 4, and this is only showing us that there was a great difference in opinions. There were students who thought that the teachers were great, and there were some other students who thought that the teachers were terrible. That means that the performance was really low. So we have a high range of opinions. Remember that the scale was from 1 to 5, and in this case the whole scale was used. That means that there were very different opinions concerning the teacher's performance. This can be reflected also in the standard deviation, and something that I want you to look at in the first set of factors. If you take a look at the use of examples, the standard deviation goes above 1 point. And we have the same case for fair evaluation. So what does this mean? This means actually that because there are so many differences in the student's opinion, which is over 1 point, as I already said, the value of the mean could actually be higher or lower than we are seeing it. That means that there is a lot of differences in the opinion, and it's very difficult to trust like the value of the mean. That's basically what it means. Normally what we want to see is that people agree more in the point of view. That means that there are not like such big differences, and in this case the lowest values of the standard deviation was basically for target language use. So this means that the students agreed basically that the teachers use the language in a very appropriate way in the classroom. We have some other low values for the standard deviation for sequence and pace, for example. So this means that there are not a lot of differences, and basically we can trust more and make more generalizations about the mean that we obtained. We can do the same then for the teacher characteristics, and then we will see that the highest standard deviation was the one for concern for students' success and motivation skills. So there were a lot of differences in opinions. But if you see, for example, in the case of knowledge of the subject, we can see that there are fewer differences in opinions. That means that the results of the mean can be very reliable in this case. So now, what conclusions can I draw from this? Okay, there are several conclusions, and this is the same thing that you're going to do in your final paper. So first of all, the general view of these statistics shows that the students have a really good opinion about the teacher. That means that in most of the cases the mean was above 4, and if you remember, 4 means good. Okay, the only highest level was outstanding, which was number 5. So they are very well evaluated. That means that the students have a good opinion of them in most of the cases. But there are some aspects in which the teacher's performance could be improved, and those ones could be basically as far as lesson quality is concerned, the use of media. If you see, the mean is 3.5, and 3, as you remember, is in the middle. That is neither good nor bad. That means that the teachers could improve the use of media, and also the content and materials. So basically here what we're seeing is that the students are not very satisfied with the content and the materials that are used in class. And then also we have clarity of objectives and use of examples. Those are some of the lowest aspects. So if I were to make decisions about these teachers, what will I do? Well, basically I think if there are some decisions to be made in this case, would be to train the teachers in the use of media. It seems to me that they needed in this case some specific training in the use of tools, so that they can make their lessons more attractive, more interactive for students. It is also important to check what's happening with the materials. That means that I will probably, after this, I would carry out an assessment of the opinions concerning the materials on the part of the students and the teachers, to see if maybe the materials could be changed or improved somehow. Another thing, for example, I am concerned about the clarity of objectives. I think the objectives of the lesson have to be clear for the students. So in this case, of course, I will also look at that. I will just make sure that the students are more informed about the objectives of the course, and they think that these objectives are satisfied, with the lessons. So as we can see, an assessment instrument can provide important information for us to make decisions about any aspects of the program. In this case was the teachers. So what you have to do for your final project is basically do the same thing. You're going to calculate the statistics, then you're going to look at them, you're going to interpret them, and you're going to draw some conclusions. That's what I want for the final project. And now going to the specific case of the objective item analysis, we're going to see how we can analyze the information from objective items. Now this is one example of objective items. This is taken from Cambridge First Certificate, and as you can see, it's a multiple choice task. There is a clause. The students have to fill in the words, but they have options. In this case, of course, there is only one possible answer, and that's why we call it an objective item. Now to analyze the objective items, of course, during their piloting, it is very important to have, first of all, a good number of items, because we need to see how they work and see if they work accordingly to our objectives, or if we have to modify them or change them. So then these items can first be revised and administered to a group so that we can know how they work before we use them in real tests. So it is very important that to remember that before we administer any test, we have to pilot the items with a group that is similar to the group that we're interested in. So you give the test to some students that have the same characteristics of the group of interest, and then of course they will answer the test, and then you have a lot of information to analyze. We're going to enter it in Excel or in SPSS if we're rich, so that we can analyze them. Now this is one example of how we enter the data in Excel for objective item analysis. As you can see, we have first of all a row with all of the students, student 1, student 2, student 3, student 4, and so on. And then we have the number of items, item number 1, item number 2, 3, 4, and so on. Now what do we enter here? If the student answers an item correctly, we're going to write number 1. If the student answers an item incorrectly, then we're going to write a 0. Remember that this is what we call a dichotomous scale, in which we have only two possible values. 1 is correct, 0 is incorrect. So we're going to do it like that for all of the items and for all of the students, and then we'll be ready to carry out our item. So after the information has been entering in the scale in Excel, we are ready to perform an item analysis. And in this case, it's very important that we can order the test takers from the highest to the lowest scores, and then we can analyze the items. Now the first thing that we're going to calculate is the facility index. We need to see what is the level of difficulty of our items to make sure that they have a reasonably high level of difficulty, but they can also show us some important information about the competencies of our test takers. So in short, this value refers to the percentage of students who answer the item correctly, and we have a formula where the facility index means the number of correct answers divided by the number of students. For example, if I have a group of 100 students and 80 of them answer the item correctly, I divided 80 by 100 and the result is 0.8. This is the facility index. Given this, if you see, this is like a percentage of the number of people who answer a given item correctly. So then the highest possible facility index is 1, That happens when everybody answers the item correctly. And on the other hand, the lowest possible value is 0. That means that when nobody answers an item correctly. So the facility index of our test items will depend on our purposes. I think, for example, that in a given exam we can have a certain number of easy items, then some medium difficulty items, and then some difficult items, so that we can effectively measure different levels of competence in our students. Because of course this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to see what students are more competent than others and to what extent. So, as I had already said, we can use a balance of easy, medium, and difficult items in a given test, and actually we can create different versions of the same test. In this way, we can guarantee that there will be the same number of items with the same degree of difficulty. This is what we call reliability across test versions. The second index that we're going to calculate is the discrimination index, and in this case what we have to do first of all is to organize the total test taker scores from the highest to the lowest. Then of course we're going to have two groups. We're going to divide it in two, and the ones that are on the top, we're gonna call them the upper half, or the high achievers. I mean the good students, the more competent ones, and the ones that are at the bottom will be called the lower half, or the low achievers. Now, what is the discrimination index? It's a number that is very important because in the logic of things, the students who obtain a total high score must have answered correctly every individual item. So the discrimination index, in very simple terms, refers to how well an individual item makes a difference between high and low scorers. The formula is as follows. The discrimination index equals the upper half minus the lower half divided by the number of test takers. So for example, if in a group I have 20 students in total, and the most competent students, the ones that are at the top 10 students, get 8 correct answers, and if the students in the lower group, that means the students from the half to the bottom, they answer correctly just 3 times, or 3 of them. In this case we have 8 minus 3 gives me 5, and then I'm going to divide it by the total number of students, which is 20, and the discrimination index is 0.25. Something important about the discrimination index is that this number ranges between 1, which is positive discrimination. If you get 1, this means that all of the students in the upper half, the high achievers, answer the item correctly, and that all of the students in the lower group, the low achievers, answer the item incorrectly. And so we have a lot of positive discrimination. This will mean that your item is showing you all of the good students and all of the bad students. Another possibility is 0, and in this case there is no discrimination. This will mean that the same number of students who answer the item correctly in the upper group is the same as the number of students who answer it correctly in the lower group. So this means that this item can be answered correctly. It doesn't really matter if you are a high achiever or a low achiever. Everybody can answer this item. Now the worst thing that could happen is that you get a -1, because in this case the discrimination will be negative. This will basically mean that your best students answer this item incorrectly, and all of your bad students, the ones in the lower half, answer the question correctly. So this will be a very, very strange situation. So basically, when you have a negative discrimination, what you have to do is revise the items, because there must be something wrong. These items must be tricky, or there must be something about them, because it is not possible that the good students answer it incorrectly and the bad students answer it correctly. So either you can revise them or discard them completely. I mean, it's to create new ones, because you don't want items that have a negative discrimination index. The last part of an objective item analysis will be the distractor analysis. And in this case, basically what you want to do is, when you have multiple choice tests, you can verify that the distractors work correctly. Like this, you can guarantee reliability. So in this case, for example, imagine that we have this item. If you blank the bell, the door would have been opened. And these are my distractors. The first one, A, says would ring, B, had rung, C, would rung, and D, were ringing. So then again, we're going to enter the number of test takers who answer it correctly, who selected this item in the upper half, and we will write the number of students who selected this distractor in the lower half, and we're gonna count the total. Something that we want to see here is that every distractor must be chosen by at least one test taker, because if nobody chooses one distractor, that means that the distractor is not doing its job, which is basically that somebody will choose it. If you don't have distractors that work, in that case, it's like you don't have, for example, in this case, 4 options, but you have actually 3 options if nobody selects one distractor. Every distractor must be chosen by at least one student in the lower or upper half. Okay.